Speech off.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is the third video in my middle grade recommendation series. This one is going to be all of my historical fiction, and these are mostly ones I've read more recently. And probably ones you've heard of anyway. Some are older, so maybe you haven't heard of them, but this first one, I don't even know if I'd call it historical fiction because it's within my lifetime. But, I mean, I guess for some kids it'd be historical fiction. It takes place, it's about 9/11. I cannot remember where I heard this one from. I know it was from the Christmas book exchanges with the Bookish Besties. Lindsay from Lindsay Little Library, Amanda from On the Middle Shelf, Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand, and Krista from Books and Jams. They do this Christmas book exchange, and I know that one of them got this book during, I think it was a Christmas book exchange last year. And I read it immediately because 9/11 is something I lived through, but I didn't understand it at the time. This is going to sound really bad, but keep in mind, I'm blind and I have no idea what that looks like. So when people told me planes are crashing, I was just like, why is everybody so upset? Cars crash all the time. And I know that sounds really crass and terrible, but like I really had no concept of why everybody was crying. I just wanted them to stop talking about it because I hate seeing people cry. So I just kind of didn't think about it because, yeah. So these books about 9/11 really get hit home. It's really interesting how, like, I genuinely had no understanding of what happened and everybody else did, and like had this like huge trauma response, even kids who saw it happen. But I'm just like, why is everybody crying and can we stop talking about it? Just because I had no concept of what a plane crash meant and why everybody was terrified. But yeah, I sort of felt sort of guilty about that. And so like I've been reading a lot of books about 9/11, almost torturing myself with information to make up for being so like dense about it, like just unfeeling about it as a kid. Hold on.
Speech on.
He's gonna die.
Mute 20% close button. Stop recording. Speech off.
No, don't stop recording. Anyway, so this first book is called Towers Falling by Jewel Parker Rhodes. When her 5th grade teacher hints at that a series of lessons about home and community will culminate with one big answer about 2 tall towers once visible outside their classroom window, Deja can't help but feel confused. She sets off on a journey of discovery with new friends Ben and Sabine by her side. But just as she gets closer to answering big questions about who she is, what America means, and how communities can grow and heal, she uncovers new questions too. Like, why does Pop get so angry when she brings up anything about the towers? So she doesn't know about it. So this book kind of really had an impact because I didn't really know much about it. Like, I knew that the towers fell and the planes crashed, but I don't know why. Like, I don't know if my brain just didn't understand. And I was 10 years old. It's not like I was 4. I don't know. I've always sort of felt guilty about not understanding the magnitude of what that was like. But I mean, it's not like my parents were describing the carnage either, you know? I think they were probably glad that I was dumb at the time. And I couldn't understand. Anyway, let's get on to some happier things. Some orphans. Jesus. Some orphans. A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus. A lot of you have heard of this book, but it really is happier, kind of. Anyway, set against the backdrop of World War II, Anna, Edmund, and William are evacuated from London to live in the countryside, bouncing from home to home in search of a permanent family. It is 1940, and Anna, 9, Edmund, 11, and William, 12, have just lost their grandmother. Unfortunately, she left no provision for their guardianship in her will. Her solicitor comes up with a preposterous plan. He will arrange for the children to join a group of school children who are being evacuated to a village in the country, where they will live with families for the duration of the war. He also hopes that whoever takes the children on might end up willing to adopt them and become their new family, providing, of course, that the children can agree on the choice. Moving from one family to another, the children suffer the cruel trickery of foster brothers, the cold realities of outdoor toilets, and the hollowness of empty tummies. They seek comfort in the village lending library, whose kind librarian, Nora Mueller, seems an excellent candidate, except that she has a German husband whose whereabouts are currently unknown. Nevertheless, Nora's cottage is a place of bedtime stories and fireplaces, vegetable gardens, and hot, milky tea. Most importantly, it's a place where someone thinks they all three hung the moon. This is really all you need in a mom, if you think about it. So, yeah, basically this book is all about these three kids. Their grandmother passes away, and they're basically tricking these foster parents into taking them in, pretending they're not orphans, and if they find the right home, they'll fess up. Which, honestly, I mean, if this book weren't so good, like, you have to get past the deception of it all. Like, you need to look past it, and that was a little hard for me, but, I mean, I love the book itself and, like, the librarian and, like, how it ended, and it was fine. But can you imagine being one of those people, like, you're taking in foster kids, like, during the war, and you think you're going to give them back, and then they're like, psych, we're orphans! I don't know. That's always sort of bugged me, but, like, I can kind of look past it because the book is so good. So, I don't know. Anyway. Next, let's go on to some famine. Wow, these books are unfortunate, but I guess it's kind of history, right? Anyway, it's The Lost Year by Catherine Marsh. A lot of people have been reading this book lately, so, which I'm really happy about. I think, did Chantel read this recently? I think she did. I know Krista did. So, yeah. But this one was one of my favorite from last year. And it was on my list. It's The Lost Year by Catherine Marsh. 13-year-old Matthew is miserable. His journalist dad is stuck overseas indefinitely, and his mom has moved in his 100-year-old great-grandmother to ride out the pandemic, adding to his stress and isolation. But when Matthew finds a tattered black and white photo in his great-grandmother's belongings, he discovers a clue to a hidden chapter of her past, one that will lead to a life-shattering family secret. Set in alternating timelines that connect the present day to the 1930s and the U.S. to the USSR, Catherine Marsh's latest novel sheds fresh light on the Holodomor, the horrific famine that killed millions of Ukrainians and which the Soviet government covered up for decades. This book is really good. There's like 3 different points of view in the famine timeline, so you kind of have to keep track of these 3 different girls. They're all from the same family, but they're all like in different parts of the, well, one is in the US, I think, yeah, and then the other 2 are in different parts of like Ukraine. So yeah, but it's a really good book, and I mean, if you can stand to read stuff about the pandemic, there's that too. I actually don't mind pandemic books because, I don't know, I think that for some reason I enjoy because I can kind of relate to it because I lived the pandemic. So like, it's interesting to read about other people living through it and going, oh yeah, I did that too. So it's been sort of fun to be kind of a part of history in a weird way. Anyway, let's move on to some happier things now. This is actually happy for once. The All of a Kind Family series by Sydney Taylor. So the first one is called All of a Kind Family. Okay. It's a turn of the century in New York City's Lower East Side, and a sense of adventure and excitement abounds. For 5 young sisters, Ella, Henny, Sarah, Charlotte, and Gertie. Follow along as they search for hidden buttons while dusting Mama's front parlor, or explore the basement warehouse of Papa's peddler's shop on rainy days. The 5 girls enjoy doing everything together, except especially when it involves holidays and surprises. But no one could have prepared them for the biggest surprise of all. I won't tell you what that is. You'll have to read to find out. But this series is like really happy. There's not like a lot of like tragedy. It's just like kids being kids, and you learn about all these different Jewish holidays, and it's really fun. It makes me want to try the different food, like the latkes, I think they're called, potato pancakes. I want to try them so bad. Like, I want all this food that they talk about in these books. Like, all of it. What is gefilte fish? But I really want to try it all. So, yeah, there's that one. Now we're going to go back to some tragedy. Refugee by Alan Gratz. 3 different kids, one mission in common: escape. Yosef is a Jewish boy in 1930s Nazi Germany. With the threat of concentration camps looming, he and his family board a ship bound for the other side of the world. Isabel is a Cuban girl in 1994. With riots and unrest plaguing her country, she and her family set out on a raft, hoping to find safety and freedom in America. Mahmoud is a Syrian boy in 2015. With his homeland torn apart by violence and destruction, he and his family begin a long trek toward Europe. All 3 young people will go on harrowing journeys in search of refuge. All will face unimaginable dangers, from drownings to bombings to betrayals. But for each of them, there is always the hope of tomorrow. And although Yosef, Isabel, and Mahmoud are separated by continents and decades, surprising connections will tie their stories together in the end. And boy, is that true. Like, I did not expect some of those tie-ins at the end. Like, it's pretty wild when you see how they come together, the stories. But, I mean, if you're reading that with young kids, there is stuff in this book. Like, you need to read with a parent if you're reading this book. Don't read this by yourself. There's some stuff in this book. Same as this next one I'm going to talk about. When the World Was Ours by Liz Kessler. Ooh, another 3 friends. 3 friends, one memory. Vienna, 1936. 3 young friends, Leo, Elsa, and Max, spend a perfect day together, unaware that around them Europe is descending into a growing darkness and that they will soon be cruelly ripped apart from one another. With their lives taking them across Europe to Germany, England, Prague, and Poland, will they ever find their way back to one another? Will they want to? Yeah, yikes. Prepare to cry if you read this. Like, this is not for the faint of heart at all. So, yeah. Next, here's something you might not have heard of. I read this one as a kid. It's called Before We Were Free by Julia Alvarez. I wonder what it would be like to be free. Not to need wings because you don't have to fly away from your country. Anita de la Torre is a 12-year-old girl living in the Dominican Republic in 1960. Most of her relatives have emigrated to the United States. Her tío Donnie has disappeared. Papi has been getting mysterious phone calls about butterflies, and someone named Mr. Smith and the secret police has started terrorizing her family for their suspected opposition to the country's dictator. While Anita deals with a frightening series of events, she also struggles with her adolescence and her own personal fight to be free. This one does have a little bit of scariness to it, but I really kind of enjoyed it a lot at the same time. I love the family and kind of the suspense of it all. And there's some references to Anne Frank, too, which was kind of cool. Next, we have Kira Kira by Cynthia Kadohata. Glittering. That's how Katie Takashima's sister Lynn makes everything seem. The sky is because its color is deep, but see-through at the same time. The sea is for the same reason, and so are people's eyes. When Katie and her family moved from a Japanese community in Iowa to the deep south of Georgia, it's Lynn who explains to her why people stop on the street to stare. And it's Lynn who, with her special way of viewing the world, teaches Katie to look beyond tomorrow. But when Lynn becomes desperately ill and the whole family begins to fall apart, it is up to Katie to find a way to remind them all that there is always something glittering in the future. Kira Kira. So, yeah. Another crying book. I did not know this is a crying book. My mom found this at the library when I was little. But boy, is it a crying book. Next, we have Jefferson's Sons by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. I know I heard about this one from Amanda from On the Middle Shelf. She raved about it. I read it. I loved it. This is the untold story of Thomas Jefferson's enslaved children. Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Easton are Thomas Jefferson's children by one of the slaves, Sally Hemings. And while they do get special treatment, better work, better shoes, even violin lessons, they are still slaves and are never to mention who their father is. The lighter-skinned children have been promised a chance to escape into white society. But what does this mean for the children who look more like their mother? As each child grows up, their questions about slavery and freedom become tougher, calling into question the real meaning of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Told in 3 parts, from the points of view of 3 of Jefferson's slaves, Beverly, Madison, and a 3rd boy close to the Hemings family, these engaging and poignant voices shed light on what life was like as one of Jefferson's invisible offspring. It really does. Because, it really shows, the complications. Some of them are, really angry. And then some of them are, really torn because they kind of love him. And they don't want to believe that he, enslaves them. So it's really interesting. Because you see kind of his kind side to them. And you also see, how awful he is. Next, we have another one by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This one's more popular. Jefferson's Sons is apparently out of print, so it's hard to find. I found it on audio through my library, so I was happy about that. Yeah, this one's more popular. It's called The War That Saved My Life. 10-year-old Ada has never left her one-room apartment. Her mother is too humiliated by Ada's twisted foot to let her outside. So when her little brother Jamie is shipped out of London to escape the war, Ada doesn't waste a minute. She sneaks out to join him. So begins a new adventure of Ada, and for Susan Smith, the woman who is forced to take the 2 kids in. As Ada teaches herself to ride a pony, learns to read, and watches for German spies, she begins to trust Susan, and Susan begins to love Ada and Jamie. But in the end, will their bond be enough to hold them together through wartime? Or will Ada and her brother fall back into the cruel hands of their mother? Yikes. So, yeah. Susan is probably my favorite foster parent ever in literature. I love her so much. She's, kind of curmudgeonly, but, you start to love her. And there's a sequel to this one. It's called The War I Finally Won. So, yeah. This is one of my favorites ever. And then I think I have one more in this. No, 2 more. These are older. And I don't think you've ever heard of these. I never heard them on BookTube, but I love them. Well, okay, so Our Only May Amelia by Jennifer L. Holmes. It isn't easy being a pioneer in the state of Washington in 1899. But it's particularly hard when you are the only girl ever born in the new settlement. With 7 older brothers and a love of adventure, May Amelia Jackson just can't seem to abide her family's insistence that she behave like a proper young lady. She's sure she could do better if only there were at least one other girl living among the banks of the Nazle River. And now that Mom is going to have a baby, maybe there's hope. Inspired by the diaries of her great-aunt, the real May Amelia, first-time novelist Jennifer Holmes has given us a beautifully crafted tale of one young girl whose unique spirit captures the courage, humor, passion, and depth of the American pioneer experience. This is apparently a Newbery Honor book from 2000, which I did not know until I looked it up on Goodreads. That's kind of exciting. There's a sequel, apparently. It's called The Trouble with May Amelia, which I've never read. And I may have to add this to my very, very large TBR because I want to reread this first one and then read the second one. But let me just tell you, the grandma in this book makes Miss Minchin and the Little Princess look like a cuddly rabbit. She's terrible. Horrible. She makes Aunt Petunia from Harry Potter look cuddly. So yeah, just warning you. Evil grandma. And then I think we have one more. Yeah. Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. You probably know about this one, but you know. 10-year-old Anna-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen often think of life before the war. It's now 1943 and their life in Copenhagen is filled with school, food shortages, and the Nazi soldiers marching through town. When the Jews of Denmark are relocated, quote unquote, Ellen moves in with the Johanssons and pretends to be one of the family. Soon, Anna-Marie is asked to go on a dangerous mission to save Ellen's life. I read this in 6th grade. It was like my first World War II historical fiction, and I didn't really completely understand what Nazis were or anything like that. And then I read The Diary of Anne Frank a couple of years later, and I understood, and so I went back to Number the Stars kind of with fresh eyes. I didn't really understand why like the Jewish people were persecuted when I first read it, so it was interesting to kind of just think I was reading a story about escape only to find out that it was like a true thing. So yeah, there's that. I probably should have added Anne Frank's diary to my classics list. Anyway, that is all my historical fiction recommendations. I have one more video with my contemporary reads, and then I will be done for tonight. And I can go to bed because I have a long trip ahead of me. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!
Speech off. Stop recording.